"May I stay tonight?" the Apache girl whispered. The rancher hesitated. "So, where do I sleep?" The sun was slowly sinking behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold. A quiet calm had settled over the ranch, as if the earth itself was taking a deep breath after a long day. The rancher, a man used to the rhythms of nature, was finishing his last chores. He had spent the day checking the fences, feeding the cattle, and repairing a broken gate. His hands were rough, calloused from years of hard work, and his clothes smelled faintly of hay and leather. He loved this quiet, simple life, away from the noise of towns and cities, where every sunrise and sunset felt like a blessing. As he leaned on the fence, watching the cattle graze under the soft glow of evening, he noticed a movement near the tree line. At first, he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or one of the smaller creatures that often wandered near the edges of his land. But then he saw her.
A young girl, barely more than a teenager, was standing at the edge of the clearing. Her clothing was worn and dusty, and she carried a small bundle in her arms.
She looked tired, her hair tangled and blowing slightly in the breeze, but there was a certain determination in her eyes. The rancher's first instinct was to be cautious. Strangers didn't often wander onto his land. Most people knew better than to approach this isolated ranch miles away from the nearest road. Base. Yet something about her presence struck him differently. There was no fear in her expression, no aggressive stance, only a quiet, almost fragile courage. She took a hesitant step forward, and then another, until she stood just at the edge of the ranch's yard. "May I stay tonight?" she asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper. The words caught the rancher off guard. He wasn't sure if he had heard correctly. He squinted, trying to get a better look at the girl in the dimming light. Her eyes were wide and earnest, and there was a faint trembling in her hands as she clutched the bundle closer to her chest. The rancher felt a strange tug in his chest. He was a man who had lived alone for many years, whose companions had been cattle, horses, and the occasional neighbor passing through. He was not used to having someone seek his protection, yet here was this young girl, trusting him, without knowing anything about him. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched between them like the wide-open sky above. He could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken questions hanging between them. Bed. Who was she? Where had she come from? Bed. Why was she here, alone, at this hour? His mind raced, but his heart told him something simple and clear. She needed help, and he could not turn her away. Where do you sleep?" he finally asked, his voice hesitant. He didn't know why he asked the question that way, as if testing whether she would even answer him. The girl shifted her weight, looking down at her feet, and then slowly shook her head. Her silence spoke volumes. She had no home, no family nearby, at least none that could help her tonight. Her situation was clear, even without words. The rancher ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had lived a life built on routines, on rules and boundaries that kept him safe and predictable. And yet the sight of this young girl standing alone, weary from travel and trusting him enough to ask for shelter, unsettled all of that. For the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of empathy that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He studied her more closely. She was small and delicate-looking, yet her eyes held a spark of strength that belied her appearance. Her clothes were simple, patched in places, and her shoes were worn thin. It was clear she had been on the road for a long time. Despite her fatigue, there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself, as if she had learned to endure hardships with resilience. She was not a child in need of pity, nor a stranger to fear. She was someone who had faced life's challenges and survived. The rancher stepped closer to the fence, unsure of what to say next. His own life had been shaped by solitude, by long days filled with work and little conversation. He had never been good with words, especially in unexpected situations like this, and yet something about her presence demanded attention. He felt a connection, fragile but undeniable, as if fate had placed her here, at this very moment, for reasons he could not yet understand.
"Do you have anyone with you?" he asked finally.
His voice was softer this time, filled with genuine concern. The girl shook her head again, perplexed. Her lips trembled slightly, but she didn't speak. She simply handed him the small bundle she had been carrying. Inside, he could see a few pieces of clothing, a small blanket, and a worn leather pouch. It was not much, but it was all she had. He realized that her request was not just for shelter, but for safety, for someone to offer a brief reprieve from the harshness of the world outside. The rancher felt a pang of empathy he hadn't anticipated. He remembered his own younger days, when he had faced hardships on his own without guidance or support. The memory brought a deep sense of understanding, and with it, the resolve to help this girl, no matter how unexpected or inconvenient it might be. "All right," he said finally, with a tone that was firm but gentle. "You can stay tonight." The girl's eyes widened in relief, and a small, grateful smile broke across her face. "Phew." She nodded, her voice still barely a whisper, but filled with warmth. "Thank you," she said simply. The rancher motioned for her to follow him toward the small guest cabin at the edge of the property. It was modest, with a single room, a small bed, and a fireplace. He had built it years ago for travelers who occasionally passed through, though it had rarely been used. Now, it would serve as her refuge for the night. As they walked, the rancher couldn't help but notice the way she moved. Cautiously, as if expecting the world to be harsh, yet with a quiet resilience that inspired respect. Once inside the cabin, he showed her the bed and the small fireplace. "You can rest here," he said. "I'll make a fire and bring some food." She nodded, still shy, still unsure. But there was a sense of relief in the way she set down her bundle and allowed herself to breathe more freely. The rancher could feel the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, and he realized that even this small act of kindness was meaningful. That night, as the fire crackled and the shadows danced on the cabin walls, the rancher and the girl shared a quiet moment of understanding. Words were few, but the presence of another human being, someone willing to care and offer safety, was enough. The rancher reflected on how unexpected life could be, how a single knock on the door, a single request whispered in the twilight could change the course of a day, perhaps even a life. Outside, the night was still and peaceful. The stars glittered in the clear sky, and the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. Inside the cabin, the girl curled up under the blanket, finally feeling a sense of security she hadn't felt in a long time. The rancher, sitting nearby and tending the fire, watched her with a mixture of concern and admiration. In that quiet moment, two strangers from very different worlds found a fragile connection, a beginning of trust that neither had anticipated. The night stretched on, and though sleep came slowly, there was a sense of calm that neither had experienced that day. The rancher knew that tomorrow would bring more questions, more decisions, and perhaps challenges. But for now, he felt a simple satisfaction in knowing he had done the right thing. That, in a world full of uncertainty, he had chosen kindness, and it had brought a small, yet meaningful moment of peace to both their lives. By the time the fire burned low, the rancher finally allowed himself to relax. He looked at the girl sleeping quietly, and a gentle smile touched his lips. Perhaps this night, born of chance and courage, would mark the start of something unexpected, a story of resilience, understanding, and the quiet power of human connection.
The next morning dawned with a soft golden light filtering through the small cabin window.
The air was cool and fresh, carrying the earthy scent of the ranch and the distant hills. Birds began their morning songs, filling the silence with gentle melody. The rancher had been awake for some time, as was his habit, enjoying the calm of early morning. He quietly moved around the cabin, tending to the small chores that marked the start of his day. Stoking the fire, fetching water from the barrel, and arranging a simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and milk. The Apache girl stirred under the blanket. She had slept more soundly than expected, though occasionally her brow creased as if she were still half in the memories of her long journey. The rancher watched her quietly, careful not to disturb her. He had never had anyone stay in his home before, certainly not a young stranger with such quiet courage. There was a vulnerability about her, yet beneath it he sensed strength and independence that intrigued him. Finally, she sat up, brushing the hair from her face. Her eyes met his, and for a moment they shared a silent understanding. There was no need for words. The trust they had begun to build the night before lingered between them. She gave a small, shy smile, and the rancher nodded in acknowledgement. He motioned toward the table. "Breakfast is ready," he said simply. She moved toward the table, her steps careful and deliberate. She hesitated for a moment as if unsure whether she truly belonged in this place, and then sat down. The rancher noticed her eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. The worn wooden furniture, the small fireplace, the stacks of firewood, and the few simple decorations he kept. Everything in the cabin was practical, with little ornamentation, but it radiated a sense of order and care. "You don't have to be afraid," he said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "You're safe here." Her gaze softened, and she nodded. The simple reassurance meant more than words could express. She had traveled a long distance, through uncertain paths and over harsh terrain, carrying only what she could manage. The idea that someone would offer her safety without question or hesitation was new and unfamiliar. Yet she felt a glimmer of hope, fragile but persistent, growing in her heart. They ate in quiet companionship, the sound of utensils against plates mingling with the faint morning breeze. The rancher didn't ask many questions at first. He wanted to give her space. He understood that trust could not be forced, and some stories were only shared in time. Still, curiosity tugged at him. Who was she? What had brought her to this remote corner of the world? And most importantly, what would become of her if she stayed here? After breakfast, the rancher decided it was time to take her on a short walk around the property. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you round." She hesitated, but then followed, her movements graceful yet careful. The ranch stretched for miles, a mixture of open fields, rolling hills, and clusters of trees. Cattle wandered peacefully, grazing on the fresh morning grass. Horses in the distance lifted their heads as the two approached, and the rancher introduced each one in a low, calm voice, as if speaking to friends rather than animals. The girl listened intently, asking questions in her soft voice. She wanted to know the names of the horses, how the fences worked, and why certain crops grew in certain fields. Her curiosity was genuine, but it also revealed something deeper. A desire to understand the world she had stumbled into, a need to find footing in an unfamiliar place. The rancher admired her attentiveness. In her questions, he saw intelligence, thoughtfulness, and a quiet determination to adapt. They walked in silence for a while, letting the sounds of the ranch envelop them. The wind rustled the leaves, birds chirped overhead, and somewhere nearby a stream trickled over rocks. The rancher found himself talking, sharing stories about his life, the animals, and the work required to keep a ranch running. She listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions or offering small observations. It was a simple conversation, yet it carried an undercurrent of trust, a bridge forming between two people who had only just met. As they approached a small corral, the rancher stopped. He looked at her seriously. "Psst. I need to ask you something," he said, Where do you usually sleep? I need to know so I can help you properly. The girl's expression faltered, and she looked away, hugging her bundle closer. Her voice was barely audible. Psst. I don't have a place right now, she admitted. I've been traveling alone for many days, and but I wasn't sure where I would go tonight. The rancher nodded slowly, understanding her situation more clearly. He could see the weariness in her eyes, the slight slump of her shoulders from fatigue and uncertainty. He felt a strong sense of responsibility, knowing that he had already promised her shelter, but now realizing how alone she truly was. He thought about the world outside this ranch, where she might face dangers, harsh weather, or unkind people. It made him more determined to protect her, at least for now.
You don't have to worry about tonight, he said firmly.
Phew. You'll stay here, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. For now, you just need to rest and get your strength back. Bah. Her eyes widened slightly, and a small, tentative smile appeared on her lips. Relief and gratitude mingled in her expression. Bay. She had faced uncertainty for so long that even small reassurances felt monumental. For the first time in many days, she felt safe, if only for a moment. The rancher led her back to the cabin, and they spent the rest of the morning completing small tasks. She helped fetch water, sweep the floor, and carry firewood. Each movement was careful, deliberate, as if she wanted to prove her usefulness and worth. The rancher watched quietly, impressed by her diligence and humility. There was something admirable about someone who had endured so much yet remained willing to learn and contribute. By midday, the sun was high in the sky, casting warm light across the fields. The rancher suggested they take a break and rest in the shade of a large oak tree near the barn. They sat together on the grass, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional neigh of a horse, and the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a peaceful moment, a pause in the rhythm of life, where both could simply exist without worry. The girl spoke softly, sharing fragments of her story. She had grown up in a nearby community, but had left due to circumstances she didn't fully explain. Her words were careful, measured,
as if testing whether the rancher could be trusted.
Bet. He listened without interruption, offering gentle nods and understanding glances. He didn't need every detail. He only needed to know that she had come seeking safety, and that was enough for him. Bay. As the afternoon wore on, the rancher noticed that the girl's shoulders were straighter, her movements more confident. The simple acts of working together and sharing space had begun to ease the tension in her body. Bay. She laughed softly at something he said, a rare sound that carried warmth and lightness. For the rancher, it was a small but meaningful sign, proof that she was beginning to feel comfortable, beginning to trust him. The rest of the day passed quietly. They repaired a section of fence, fed the animals, and prepared a simple dinner. With each task, the girl's confidence grew, and the rancher found himself admiring her resilience. She had been through much, yet she faced each new challenge with patience and determination. It reminded him of the strength that often went unnoticed in people, the kind that didn't need to be loud or boastful to be powerful.
As evening approached, the rancher noticed a change in himself as well.
He had spent years in solitude, believing that life on the ranch required little beyond routine and hard work. Yet, having the girl there had brought a new perspective, a sense of connection, of shared humanity that he had forgotten could exist. He realized that sometimes life's unexpected moments, a knock on the door, a whispered question, could bring profound change.
That night, as they sat by the fireplace, sharing a modest meal, the rancher and the girl reflected on the day.
Words were still few, but there was a growing sense of trust and mutual respect. She began to speak more freely, asking questions about the ranch and sharing small stories from her past. He answered with patience and care, aware that each word helped to build a foundation of security and understanding. The night settled around the cabin, quiet and calm. Outside, the stars shone brightly and the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the presence of another person created a feeling of safety and companionship. The rancher watched the girl as she prepared for bed, noting the small signs of comfort and ease beginning to show. He felt a sense of pride and satisfaction in his ability to help, knowing that offering shelter and kindness could make a tangible difference in someone's life. By the time they both retired for the night, the rancher reflected on the day's events. What had started as hesitation and uncertainty had transformed into trust and understanding. He realized that this unexpected visitor, the young Apache girl, had brought something valuable into his life. A reminder that even in a world of solitude, connection, empathy, and human kindness were possible. For the girl, the day had been a revelation. She had come seeking refuge, and she had found it, along with a sense of hope she had not felt in a long time. The rancher's patience, understanding, and quiet strength had given her a place to rest, both physically and emotionally. It was a start, a new beginning that promised safety, guidance, and perhaps even friendship. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the ranch. Dew sparkled on the grass, and the distant hills looked calm and peaceful in the early light. Birds chirped cheerfully, welcoming the day, and the rancher was already awake, moving quietly around the cabin. He tended the small chores that marked the beginning of his day, stoking the fireplace, fetching water from the well, and checking on the animals. The routine comforted him. But today there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet curiosity about how the day would unfold. The Apache girl stirred beneath the blanket, her face still soft with sleep. The warmth of the cabin and the lingering firelight from the previous night had given her some comfort, yet her eyes held traces of lingering worry. She was cautious as always, watching the rancher from the corner of her eye as he moved about. There was something in his calm, steady manner that drew her attention and eased her fears slightly. Though they had only known each other for a short time, there was a growing trust forming, small but real. Good morning, the rancher said in his usual quiet voice, trying to make her feel at ease. She looked up and returned a small, shy smile. Good morning, she replied softly. The simple exchange carried a warmth neither had expected. It was a reminder that kindness could be quiet and unassuming, yet still powerful enough to bridge the gap between two strangers. After a modest breakfast, the rancher sat down and studied her thoughtfully. He had made a promise to let her stay, but he also knew that offering shelter was only the first step. There were questions he needed to ask, but he didn't want to overwhelm her. I need to ask you something, he said carefully. Do you have anywhere to go after today? Any family or friends who could help?
The girl shook her head slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of her blanket.
No, she whispered. I don't have anyone.
Her voice was small, but it carried the weight of truth. She had been alone for many days, traveling through open fields and forests, unsure of where she would find safety next.
The rancher could feel the courage in her words, though it was mixed with fear. She was trusting him, relying on him to make the right choice. He nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her situation. The rancher had lived most of his life alone, and he knew the world could be harsh, especially for someone as young and vulnerable as she was. Veracity. Yet, he also felt a sense of responsibility growing in him. Offering shelter wasn't enough. He needed to ensure she felt safe, supported, and respected. He had to make a decision, a real choice about how he would handle this unexpected arrival in his life. All right, he said finally after a pause. You can stay. You'll sleep in the guest cabin, and we'll take things one day at a time. bend. For now, you just need to rest, eat, and regain your strength. Her eyes widened with relief, and a small smile appeared, hesitant but genuine. She nodded, as if confirming silently that she understood and accepted his offer.
It was a simple moment, but it carried a powerful significance. The first step toward building a sense of stability in her life after days of uncertainty.
The rancher guided her to the small cabin. It was modest, with a single bed, a fireplace, and a few basic furnishings. He showed her the room and explained how things worked, where the firewood was, how to light the stove, and where she could find blankets and water. She listened carefully, absorbing every detail. It was clear she wanted to be helpful, to fit into this new environment, and perhaps even to repay the kindness he had shown her. As the day unfolded, the rancher and the girl worked together on simple tasks around the ranch. They repaired a broken fence, fed the animals, and collected eggs from the chicken coop.
Each task was small, ordinary, but the shared effort brought a quiet bond between them.
The rancher noticed how attentive she was, how carefully she handled each animal, how respectfully she followed his instructions.
It was clear that she had learned resilience and independence from a young age, and yet she was humble and willing to accept guidance.
During a break under the shade of a large oak tree, the girl spoke softly. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said. Her words were simple, but her voice carried sincerity and depth. I didn't know where else to go." The rancher nodded, understanding more than she realized. "You're welcome," he replied. Bess, sometimes life places us in difficult situations, but kindness is one way we help each other. You're safe here, at least for now. She smiled faintly, and the warmth in her expression was mirrored in the rancher's own face. They sat together for a while, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the chirping of birds, and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was a peaceful moment, a pause in time where nothing else mattered but the connection between two humans sharing space and understanding. As the afternoon wore on, the rancher realized he needed to teach her more about the daily life on the ranch. Bent, he began showing her how to care for the animals, mend fences, and handle tools safely. She absorbed the lessons quickly, asking questions and demonstrating a natural aptitude for the work. Her curiosity was genuine, not just about the tasks themselves, but about the world she was slowly becoming part of. "You're a quick learner," he said quietly, watching her carefully. She blushed slightly, glancing down at her hands. "I have to be," she whispered. I've had to learn fast." Her words were simple, but they hinted at a life of challenges, of navigating hardships with little support. The rancher felt a pang of empathy, understanding that her strength was born from necessity and that her resilience was something remarkable. By evening, the rancher and the girl had established a rhythm. The work was tiring, but it was also grounding. They had shared small victories, fixing a fence, gathering eggs, and completing chores that had been waiting for weeks. Each task brought a sense of accomplishment, and each moment of cooperation strengthened their growing trust. The rancher realized that this unexpected arrival had brought new energy to the ranch, a reminder that life could change in surprising and meaningful ways. As the sun began to set, they returned to the cabin. The girl prepared a small meal with the rancher's guidance, and they ate together in companionable silence. It was a simple supper, but it carried warmth and reassurance. The rancher noticed how her posture had changed slightly, how her expressions reflected a growing comfort in the space she now occupied. She was beginning to see the ranch as a safe haven, a place where she could rest and regain her strength. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace, the firelight casting flickering shadows across the room. The rancher watched her quietly, reflecting on the day's events. What had begun as hesitation and uncertainty had transformed into trust and mutual understanding. He realized that offering shelter and kindness was more than a simple act. It was the beginning of a bond that could grow into something meaningful. The girl, for her part, felt a sense of relief she had not experienced in many days. The uncertainty, the fear, and the exhaustion of her journey had been overwhelming, but now, in this quiet cabin, she felt a fragile sense of safety and hope. The rancher's patience and calm guidance had given her more than shelter. It had given her the assurance that someone cared, that she could rest and recover without fear. Night fell slowly, bringing a deep quiet over the ranch. The stars appeared one by one, twinkling in the clear sky. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and grass. Inside the cabin, the girl curled up under the blanket, feeling a sense of warmth and security. The rancher, tending the fire one last time, watched her with quiet satisfaction. Brusque. He knew that this night marked the first step in a larger journey, one where trust, patience, and understanding would continue to shape their lives. As they both settled for the night, a sense of calm settled over them. The rancher reflected on the unexpected turn of events. How a simple question, a hesitant plea, and a moment of courage had brought a new presence into his life. He realized that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a profound impact, creating bonds and connections that would endure long after the moment had passed. For the girl, the day had been transformative. She had entered the ranch uncertain, cautious, and weary. And now she found herself part of a rhythm, a routine, and a space where she could begin to feel safe. The rancher's decision to welcome her had opened the door to a new chapter, one filled with the possibility of trust, understanding, and the gentle beginnings of friendship. The night deepened, and the cabin grew quiet except for the soft crackle of the dying fire. The girl drifted off to sleep, and the rancher finally allowed himself to relax. Tomorrow would bring more work, more learning, and more moments of connection. But for now, they both rested in the comfort of a shared understanding. It was a day that began with hesitation, uncertainty, and questions, but it ended with trust, hope, and the quiet reassurance that two lives, brought together by chance, could create something meaningful and enduring. In the simple routines of the ranch, they had discovered the power of patience, empathy, and the human ability to care for one another, even in the most unexpected circumstances. Night had fully settled over the ranch, wrapping the wide fields and rolling hills in a deep, velvety darkness. The sky sparkled with countless stars, scattered like tiny diamonds across the black expanse. The moon rose slowly, its silver light glinting off the tops of the grass and casting long, soft shadows across the ranch. The air was cool, carrying the scent of earth, wildflowers, and the distant forest. It was the kind of night that felt timeless, where every sound, the whisper of the wind, the lowing of cattle, the occasional rustle of leaves, was amplified in the quiet of solitude. Inside the small guest cabin, the Apache girl lay on the bed, wrapped in the soft blankets the rancher had provided. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the gentle crackle of the fireplace, feeling the warmth seep through the room. But despite the coziness of the cabin and the safety it offered, sleep did not come immediately. Her mind was alive with thoughts, memories of the journey she had undertaken, and the strange twists of fate that had led her here. She thought about the miles she had traveled, the loneliness she had endured, and the uncertainty that had filled every step of the way. Yet, amidst all of that, there was a small, flickering sense of relief. For the first time in many days, she felt safe. Someone had offered her shelter without hesitation, without judgment, simply because it was the right thing to do. She had expected skepticism, suspicion, perhaps even rejection, but instead she had found warmth and acceptance. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, and it made her heart beat a little faster, with both hope and caution. The rancher, meanwhile, sat in his chair by the fireplace, quietly tending the dwindling flames. He had finished his own evening chores, feeding the animals and securing the barn for the night. Breath. Yet he found it impossible to fully relax.
His thoughts were occupied by the young girl sleeping in the cabin, the first real guest he had ever had, the first person he had offered refuge to in many years.
He reflected on the day, on her courage, her humility, and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. Though she had arrived timid and cautious, she had quickly adapted to the rhythm of the ranch, learning and helping wherever she could. As he watched her from across the room, he realized that their connection went beyond mere shelter. There was a silent understanding forming between them, a recognition of the struggles each had faced in life. Best. He thought about his own past, about the years he had spent in solitude, and he understood in a way he hadn't expected that offering kindness could create a profound impact. This young girl who had come to his doorstep with nothing but a small bundle of belongings had brought with her a sense of vitality, trust, and even hope.
The girl finally shifted in her sleep, murmuring softly in her native language.
The rancher leaned forward slightly, curious but careful not to intrude. He had heard her speaking bits of it before, quiet words she muttered under her breath, as if sharing them only with herself. There was a beauty in the way she spoke, a cadence and rhythm that was both foreign and comforting. Though he did not understand her language fully, he could feel the emotions behind her words, a mix of longing, fatigue, and cautious optimism. The wind outside began to rustle through the trees, carrying with it the soft sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, its voice carrying across the open fields. The rancher listened, letting the sounds remind him of the vastness of the world beyond the cabin walls. He realized how small their space was in comparison to the endless land. Yet within these four walls, they had created a microcosm of safety, understanding, and trust. The idea warmed him, not just physically, but emotionally.
Minutes turned into hours, and the girl began to stir awake again, shifting slightly as if emerging from a dream.
Her eyes opened slowly, meeting the rancher's gaze. For a brief moment, there was silence, a pause that held more meaning than any words could convey. She gave a small, tentative smile, and he nodded gently, offering reassurance without speaking. In that moment, no questions were necessary. Both understood that the night, though quiet and still, had become a turning point, a moment of connection that would linger beyond the hours of darkness.
She finally sat up, brushing her hair from her face, and spoke softly.
"Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was filled with gratitude, but also a sense of awe at the simplicity of the act. Being allowed to rest, to feel safe, and to be treated with respect. Bah.
The rancher smiled faintly in return. "You're welcome," he said quietly.
You deserve a safe place. That's all. Bah. After a few moments of silence, he suggested,
"Do you want to see the stars outside? The night is clear, and it's a good way to calm your mind before sleep."
She nodded, eager but hesitant, and together they stepped outside. The night air was crisp against their skin, and the sky stretched endlessly above them. Stars dotted the heavens, shining brightly against the dark canvas. The rancher pointed to constellations, explaining their names and stories in simple words. She listened with fascination, her eyes wide as she traced the shapes in the sky. Though she had lived close to nature, she had not often seen such a vast open sky unbroken by trees or mountains. For a while they stood together in companionable silence, letting the night speak to them. The girl felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time. The rancher, too, felt a quiet contentment, an understanding that sometimes the smallest gestures, the simplest acts of care could have the greatest impact. They had not spoken much, but their presence was enough, a shared acknowledgement of trust, safety, and the quiet beauty of the night. Eventually, they returned to the cabin. The rancher made sure the fireplace was steady and that the blankets were arranged comfortably. Psst. The girl settled into bed again, and he sat nearby for a few moments, making sure she was warm and secure. He reflected on the day, on the progress she had made in trusting him, and on the subtle bond forming between them. It was fragile but significant, built on kindness, respect, and mutual understanding. As she drifted back to sleep, her breathing slow and even, the rancher allowed himself to relax fully for the first time that night. He understood that the act of welcoming her into his home, offering her shelter and safety, had created something greater than the sum of its parts. It had created a connection, a human bond that transcended words and circumstances. Back outside, the wind continued to whisper through the trees, and the stars continued to shine brightly. The rancher felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that for tonight at least, the girl was safe, and he had done the right thing. It was a simple truth, but one that carried profound weight. Life had brought her to his doorstep, and in turn she had brought meaning, hope, and connection into his life. The night stretched on peacefully. The cabin was warm, the fire crackled softly, and the girl slept soundly for the first time in many nights. The rancher reflected on the unpredictable nature of life. How chance encounters could change paths, how courage could open doors, and how kindness could create ripples far beyond a single act. By the time the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, the rancher finally leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Tomorrow would bring more work, more questions, and more steps in their journey together. But for tonight, everything was calm, and the bond they had begun to forge held strong. He understood that trust was built slowly, through patience and understanding, and that this young girl was learning to trust him in her own way, just as he was learning to trust her presence and resilience. In the quiet hours before dawn, two lives rested under the same roof. One a man who had lived largely alone, shaped by years of hard work and solitude, and the other a young girl traveling through life with courage, resilience, and hope. Their worlds had collided unexpectedly, yet they had found something rare and beautiful, a shared moment of peace, connection, and trust that would shape the days to come. The night continued, silent except for the soft crackle of the fire and the gentle rhythm of breathing. In that silence, both the rancher and the girl felt a sense of calm that went deeper than comfort or safety. It was the quiet understanding that despite uncertainty and hardship, human kindness, patience, and trust could create moments of genuine security and warmth. By the time the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, coloring the sky with soft pink and gold, the rancher and the girl had both experienced a night of quiet transformation. For her, it was a night of rest, recovery, and a glimpse of hope. For him, it was a night of reflection, understanding, and the realization that sometimes offering shelter could open the door to something far greater. A connection that would endure beyond a single night. Morning broke slowly over the ranch, spreading soft golden light across the fields and hills. The air smelled of fresh grass, earth, and the faint scent of wildflowers from the edges of the property. Birds chirped cheerfully, their songs echoing across the open space. The Apache girl stirred under the blankets, stretching slowly, the warmth of the cabin and the gentle sunlight making her feel safe and calm. She had slept deeply, perhaps for the first time in many nights, and her face reflected a sense of peace and quiet relief. The rancher was already awake, quietly moving about the cabin. He had started the day with his usual chores, checking the fences, feeding the animals, and gathering fresh water. Yet, today felt different. He glanced at the girl, noticing how much more relaxed she seemed compared to the first day she had arrived. She had started to adapt to the rhythm of life on the ranch, her confidence growing slowly, like the first rays of the sun illuminating the fields. There was a sense of continuity now, a small but steady routine that connected them. "Good morning," he said gently, careful not to startle her, Bear. "Good morning," she replied, her voice calm and steady, no longer tentative as it had been on her first day. There was a quiet ease in her manner, a sense that she belonged, at least for now, in this space. The rancher offered a small smile, noting the change in her posture and expression. It was subtle, but it reflected the progress they had made together. Trust growing slowly, built on shared tasks, small gestures, and quiet understanding. After a simple breakfast, the rancher suggested they work together on some chores. Today, they would focus on mending a section of fence that had been damaged in the last storm. As they walked toward the site, the girl carried tools with care, showing that she had already learned how to handle them safely. Her movements were confident, and she even offered suggestions on how to fix a post that was slightly crooked. The rancher nodded, impressed by her insight. "You have a good eye for detail," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, a mix of pride and humility. As they worked side by side, a sense of harmony developed. The rancher demonstrated how to dig post holes correctly, how to align the wooden beams, and how to fasten them securely. She followed carefully, asking questions when unsure, and adapting quickly to his guidance. Their cooperation was quiet but effective, punctuated by occasional comments and small laughs at minor mistakes or playful teasing. It was a rhythm that felt natural, almost like they had been working together for much longer than just a few days. While working, the rancher noticed how attentive she was to her surroundings, how she observed the wind direction, the position of the sun, and even the behavior of the animals nearby. It reminded him of his younger days, when he had learned to read the land, to understand the signs that nature gave him. Her attentiveness and patience reflected a maturity beyond her years, a resilience shaped by experiences he could only imagine.
He began to feel not just responsibility for her safety, but a deep admiration for her character. After finishing the fence, they moved to the barn to check on the horses and cows.
She handled the animals with care and respect, brushing their coats gently and speaking softly to calm them. The rancher watched her closely, noting how her confidence had grown from the first day she had arrived. She was no longer shy or hesitant. She moved with quiet purpose, her actions reflecting trust in herself and in him. During a short break under the shade of a large oak tree, the girl spoke softly. "I never imagined I could feel safe somewhere," she admitted. "I thought the world outside would never give me a place to rest." Her voice was calm but honest, carrying a sense of vulnerability that made the rancher pause. He looked at her carefully, seeing the truth in her words, and felt a surge of determination. She had endured so much already, and it was now his responsibility to ensure that this place remained a refuge for her. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "No one will harm you, and no one will take that away. This is your place for as long as you need it." A faint smile crossed her face, and her eyes glimmered with gratitude. It was more than relief. It was hope. For the first time, she could imagine a future, even if only a small one, where safety, kindness, and trust were possible. She realized that her journey had brought her not just to a physical shelter, but to a person willing to help her navigate the challenges she faced. As the afternoon wore on, they continued working on small tasks around the ranch, collecting eggs, feeding chickens, and preparing wood for the fireplace. Each shared task strengthened their bond, creating a rhythm of cooperation and understanding. The rancher observed that she had begun to smile more freely, laugh lightly at minor jokes, and even offer suggestions for organizing supplies or improving routines. Her transformation was subtle but evident, a reflection of the trust and security she had gained in the short time she had been there. By evening, the rancher suggested a simple dinner of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. They ate together in the cabin, the warmth of the fire adding comfort and light to the room. The girl shared small stories of her life before she arrived, memories of her family, and moments of learning she had experienced during her journey. He listened quietly, offering encouragement and understanding, never rushing or interrupting. The atmosphere was calm and peaceful, filled with the quiet satisfaction of companionship and mutual respect. After dinner, they stepped outside to enjoy the clear night sky. Stars blanketed the heavens, shining brightly over the open fields. The rancher pointed out constellations, and she listened intently, her eyes following the patterns in awe. "I've never seen so many stars," she whispered. "Psst, it's beautiful." He smiled gently. The world is full of things like this. Small wonders that remind us of how vast and mysterious life can be. Sometimes it takes time to notice them, especially when life is hard. But they're always there. She nodded, absorbing the words, feeling a sense of peace and possibility. In that quiet moment, standing beneath the infinite sky, both of them felt a profound connection, not just to each other, but to the world around them. The ranch, the animals, the stars, and the wind through the trees all became part of a new life, a life that was slowly forming through trust, patience, and shared experience. Later, back in the cabin, the girl prepared for bed while the rancher ensured the fire was steady. She lay down, feeling comfortable and secure for the first time in weeks. As she drifted towards sleep, she realized that the rancher had become more than just a protector. He had become a companion, someone she could rely on, someone whose presence reassured her in ways she could not yet fully explain. The rancher sat nearby for a while, reflecting on the days that had passed since she had first arrived. He thought about how a single question, "May I stay tonight?" had changed everything. Pay. It had brought her into his life, and in turn had brought something new and meaningful to him. Their shared experiences, small chores, quiet conversations, and mutual respect had created a bond that neither had expected, but both valued deeply. He realized that life often brought unexpected challenges, but also unexpected rewards. The girl had come to him in need, seeking shelter and kindness, and he had offered it. In doing so, he had discovered a connection, a friendship, and a sense of purpose beyond the routines of ranch life. The realization brought a quiet satisfaction, a feeling that even in a world filled with uncertainty, acts of empathy and trust could create lasting change. Over the next few days, their routine settled into a comfortable rhythm. She helped with chores, learned more about the animals, and began to feel a sense of belonging. The rancher provided guidance, support, and encouragement, helping her build confidence and independence. Each day brought small moments of joy, shared laughter, quiet observations of the land, and simple meals enjoyed together. They began to share more stories of their pasts, revealing not just challenges, but dreams and aspirations. The girl spoke of her hopes for the future, her desire to learn new skills, and her curiosity about the world beyond the ranch. The rancher listened, offering wisdom and encouragement, reminding her that her experiences had shaped her into a strong, capable person. Through these conversations, their bond deepened, grounded in trust, respect, and shared understanding. Time passed, and the girl's presence brought a new energy to the ranch. The animals responded to her gentle care. The chores were completed with greater efficiency, and the rancher found renewed purpose in mentoring and guiding her. Their lives, once solitary and cautious, had intertwined in a way that felt natural and meaningful. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the distant hills, the girl spoke softly. "I feel like I finally have a place where I belong," she said. Her voice was calm, filled with sincerity. "A place where I'm safe and where someone believes in me." The rancher nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "You do belong here," he replied. "This place is yours as much as it is mine. We'll face whatever comes together, and you'll always have a safe place here." Her eyes glimmered with gratitude, and she smiled, the kind of smile that reflected not just relief, but hope. Together they watched as the sky transformed into deep shades of orange and purple, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a recognition of resilience, kindness, and the power of human connection. In the days that followed, the rancher and the girl continued to build their lives together. They faced challenges, celebrated small victories, and learned from each other. She became more confident, independent, and capable, while he discovered the joy of companionship, mentorship, and trust. Their bond, forged in moments of hesitation, patience, and empathy, became a foundation for a future filled with hope and possibility. Life on the ranch continued, steady and predictable in some ways, yet enriched by the presence of the young Apache girl. Her journey, once filled with uncertainty and hardship, had found a turning point, a place of safety, growth, and human connection. And for the rancher, her arrival had brought not only the fulfillment of helping someone in need, but also the joy of discovering a friendship that would endure, built on trust, respect, and the quiet beauty of shared life. As night fell again, the two of them sat by the fire, reflecting on the days that had passed. The girl leaned slightly toward him, comfortable and secure, while he tended the flames with quiet satisfaction. Both understood, without needing words, that something profound had begun here. A bond that would continue to grow, a new chapter in their lives that held promise, hope, and the quiet happiness of connection.